Good evening, everyone. Hello. Thank you. I would like to warmly welcome you to our roundtable, The Black Atlantic in the Netherlands. My name is Marjorie Boston. I'm co-founder of Right About Now Inc. and also the curator of this evening's event. I'm not going to say much, because we invited other amazing people to have this sharing with you. But one thing I would like to mention is that this could not have been going on and happening without with support of the Pakhuis de Zwijger. And especially three people I would like to mention. At first, of course, Martin van Hinten, my co-founder of Right About Now Inc. He's sitting there. Samra of Pakhuis de Zwijger. Thank you, Samra. And Masha Iwe. She also really contributes to this event. Last thing I want to say is warmly and also humbly invite our moderator for tonight, Chris Keulemans, to the stage, and he will take it over from me.
Okay. Thank you, Marjorie. Thank you, Maarten. Thank you for coming. So this is actually the very first roundtable in the Netherlands about the notion of the Black Atlantic, which argues that slavery was not an aberration of history, but a central fact to the creation of the modern world as we know it today. So as it was mentioned in the invitation tonight, what connection do we see between Africa, America, and Europe in today's urban culture? Right About Now Inc. has invited very, very impressive people to talk about what Paul Gilroy calls the Black Atlantic. In literature, music, politics, and philosophy, a diasporic black identity has emerged that transcends ethnicity and nationality. How is this grounded in the history of slavery? And how do we see it in action in Amsterdam today? That is what we're going to talk about, and that is what we're going to invite you to discuss with us tonight. Last night, I was reading an excellent essay by Michiel van Kempen about the new Dutch Caribbean writers. As you know, suddenly there seems to be a wave of really, really gifted young writers. Let's say, people like Gershwin Bonavacia, Dean Bowen, Radna Fabias, Johan Frens, J.Z. Herrenberg, Michael Tedja, Diana Chin, many others. And I'm sure many of them would identify as part of the Black Atlantic. Myself, I would hesitate to do so for obvious reasons, but I'm really honored to be your moderator tonight. I'll try to contribute my part. And over the past 25 years, of course, I've learned that when Maarten and Marjorie asks you something, there is no way to say no. Now, before we go into the deep end, I just want to check who here has read The Black Atlantic, A Counterculture for Modernity, written by Paul Gilroy, published in '93. A handful of people. I'll confess, I didn't even read it. I was trying to find it somewhere, couldn't. Online bookshops. Right About Now Inc. guarded their own single copy like something sacred. But I managed to find a book about the book, kind of Paul Gilroy for smart dummies, let's say. And it was actually very good, a lot of quotes, a lot of summaries, and the editor, Paul Williams, summarizes the book, so I want to read this summary to you so that we're all on the same page. he summarizes the core of the book, The Black Atlantic, by Paul Gilroy. Studying the African diaspora as a diaspora means not being limited to national contexts when looking at its cultural, political, and historical traditions. Rather than seeing the black vernacular culture of any one country as special and unique to it, Gilroy provides examples of cultural practices shared by different groups of black people across the Atlantic. To understand these similarities better, Gilroy proposes the model of the Black Atlantic, a single, complex unit of black cultural practitioners with profound thematic and structural similarities because of their collective history of slavery and racial oppression. The focal points of the Black Atlantic developed as its member travels back and forth across the ocean, migrating from rural areas to urban ones to find work, making new homes in other countries, and visiting continents on scientific and political missions. Travelers and migrants like these brought different cultures into contact with each other, and new cultures were produced out of this intermixture. Because migration, regularly forced, was central to the African diaspora's history, Gilroy sees the Black Atlantic identities as the product of movement, the movement from place to place of cultural forms and people. This differentiates Gilroy's concept of diaspora from earlier theories, stressing the place of origin as the source of unity and permanence for diasporic identity. In a famous play on words, Gilroy states that the African diasporic identity is a product of the roots it has taken, not the roots it comes from. So, that was the serious part, but don't be afraid, we're also going to talk about KRS-One and Broederliefde later on. In a minute, I'm going to tell you how the evening looks, but first I would like to invite with me on stage the four people who are going to speak to us in the beginning of this program. Francio Guadalupe, and yes, you may applaud. Soti Bala. Priscilla Vodel. En Faustijn Lenjekula. Okay, so all of these people will be speaking first. You can see we're seated around something that more or less looks like an oval table. There's a few chairs free, which means that after you can literally join the discussion if you want to say or ask something by taking a chair at this table. But that's for later. First, next 20 to 30 minutes, we'll have a keynote by Francio Guadalupe, cultural anthropologist, connected, teaching, lecturing here at the UvA in Amsterdam. He was the dean of the University of St. Martin, Saint-Martin. I read that his principal areas of research have been on the manner in which nationalism, multiculturality, media and religion continue to be impacted by the long colonial moment and global capital. He's pursued these interests in his research and publications on social processes on the binational island of Sint Maarten, Saint-Martin, Brazil, Aruba, and the Netherlands. He will now speak to us about urban blackness. And I have to warn you, brace yourself. Because this brilliant thinker will sweep you off your seats. Francio Guadalupe.
This is on? You can hear me? Yeah. All right. Good evening, everyone. Yes, you are? Okay. Let me begin by thanking Martin, who actually sent me and that's through the magic of Facebook, an email telling me, well, I met your very good friend, Marca Valenta, and we would like to have you to speak at a session on the Black Atlantic. And the Black Atlantic was a course that I taught beginning in 2009, first at the Radboud and then at the University of Amsterdam. So I'm happy now that it's becoming more mainstream. Let's put it this way. Can we start the PowerPoint presentation? So, as you can see, the title is Urban Blackness and a particular perspective on the Netherlands. That's what I'm going to be talking about today. Next slide. Now, you will ask yourself, what about the exegesis? What about the Black Atlantic? Why is not the Black Atlantic in your title? Or talking about Paul Gilroy? I think that what we have to do today is engage the Black Atlantic, but engage the Black Atlantic to deal with the Netherlands, because that's really what it's about. So it will not be an exegesis of this is what he says and this is what he says, but it will be an engagement with his work as it relates to the Netherlands and as it relates to an upcoming publication of mine, which deals with the Black Atlantic and other thinkers that are primarily situated in the Caribbean or of Caribbean extraction. Gilroy is also of Caribbean extraction. Next slide. So it will be a syncopated engagement with the Black Atlantic. Syncopation is of the author, essayist, scholar, Ralph Ellison, of The Invisible Man. And this is a quote of The Invisible Man. And The Invisible Man is about not being seen in the US and being treated as a simulacra, as a kind of figure. And he says, as you can read, that sometimes he's ahead of time and sometimes he's in the back. But he enters the nodes, and by entering the nodes, he actually sees the world and writes about the world in a different way. That's what this quote is about. A syncopated engagement. Syncopation is of jazz, so it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 as we usually do it. But jazz will enter into that, improvise, and continue. So it will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so forth. That's syncopation. And a syncopated engagement means actually that you do not take what is for granted, but you actually start to work with it. And when you start to work with it, you create something else. That's what a syncopated engagement is. It also means that when you ask yourself the question of what is the Netherlands, you have to recognize that the Netherlands is a set of rhythms. The Netherlands is not one thing, but it's a set of various divergent, convergent rhythms. That's what's going on right now. And therefore, to try to understand it, you have to understand it in a syncopated way. So rhythmical analysis. That changes the thing already, and recognizing that the Black Atlantic for a very long time as a paradigm, a way of constructing the world, an a priori framework, was virtually invisible. And Ellison tells us, work with that invisibility. Why? Because the colonial order and its afterlife was premised upon visibility, the dominance of one of our senses, the sense of vision. When we look at each other, we let vision actually determine who we think we are. That is a colonial imposition. This is what Ellison is trying to get at. This is what Gilroy is trying to get at in the Black Atlantic as well. So if you want to decolonize, which is a new term, you also have to decolonize the way your senses work. That's what it's about. Next slide. Are you still with me? Yeah? Okay. All right. So a syncopated analysis will be one that takes the Black Atlantic and syncopates, dances, makes music with it through terms such as the urban and blackness and so forth. So I start with the urban. Next slide. There are many ways, as I said, to understand the Netherlands. One way, a kind of dominant way, based upon the politics of fulfillment, is to say the Netherlands is a place at this moment in time where you have the rise of populism, you have still the struggles of LGBTQIA plus persons, you still have lots of racism, you have class oppression. That is one way of understanding the Netherlands. And it's valid, and a lot of people focus on that particular way of understanding the Netherlands. Another way is to say, well, if the Netherlands consists of many rhythms, then that is only one of the rhythms. What else is going on here? And the term, the Netherlands, interestingly, the word, the way we call this country, speaks about plurality, the Nederlanden. It doesn't speak about one. And a syncopated analysis is an analysis that says the moment you talk about one, you actually have not seen a society, because a society will always consist of these various rhythms interacting with one another. So I would say, without disregarding that you have a dominant rhythm that people talk about today, and it's important to talk about it, there's other rhythms going on. One other rhythm is to say the Netherlands, like the rest of the world, is currently in the time of what this guy is doing there. Next slide. It's the time of the urban. These persons have become global superstars, almost global gods and goddesses. All over the globe you can find these urban artists. Urban music is the soundtrack of globalization. It's the way you can understand it. So I'm sure some of you listen to these artists. Next slide. In the Netherlands, of course, we have also an expression of this urban. I'm going to let you hear a sound of how the urban sounds in the Netherlands. And a clip.
Eu sou maluco, baby doe niet jugo, drink van die moegoe. Ik zei drink van die moegoe. Ik zei drink van die moegoe. En neem op pop van die shisha, neem op pop van die shisha, neem op pop van die shisha, neem op pop. En neem op pop van die shisha, neem op pop van die shisha, neem op pop van die shisha, neem op pop. Ik zie je niet uit, vandaag ga ik niet uit. Ik zit tussen de wolkjes en ik voel me net een vliegtuig. Afgezet door Terry, kom binnen heel adres. Mint strawberry, mijn hoofd draait net. DJ, appeldrijven meloen, bitches geven genoeg. Credit aan de shisha doet me denken aan Jeroen. De Rosa met Raif, poesjes zeggen alsjeblieft. Ems broederliefde, Bossa zit aan een tafel van 4 met de shisha, geen wiskunde. SO naar de mensen die op misgunnen.
This is our sound of the urban. Now you might ask yourself, what exactly is the urban? And how did it emerge? Because we have a radio station called Phonics that speaks about the urban. But where did the term emerge? And when you start to look at where the term emerged, you have to go to New York, to Frankie Crocker. That was the DJ that actually coined the term the urban. And he coined it because he said, hey, wait a minute. This is not a national thing in New York. Because the hip-hop that's emerging with Heavy D and the Boys, with Biggie Smalls, this contains many people from the Caribbean. And there are persons from Africa here. So the urban, which he coined, he said, this is the soundtrack of the civil rights movement. And the civil rights movement cannot be only American. So the urban is salsa, the urban is bachata, the urban is the R&B, it's hip-hop, it's souk, it's compa, it's all that music that is emerging within the struggle for justice, the struggle for freedom. So that's, according to him, a politics of the urban. So you see in the image, you see that he's bringing these things together. Bob Marley meets Dionne Warwick. The older, longer American tradition, Dionne Warwick, the aunt of Whitney Houston and so forth, meeting the Jamaica because that was going on the moment he actually became the most popular DJ in the US, coining this term that later on we also use here in the Netherlands. Next slide. So if you talk about the urban, you would ask yourself, okay, so the urban is of black people making music. What is this blackness and who are these black people? Why do we call them black? Why do we call ourselves black? And in a Black Atlantic analysis or an analysis of thinkers, that question has to be posed. Nothing is natural. Everything is a historical product. So what exactly is this blackness that we're talking about? Next slide. What you see, and I take artists to be thinkers just as academics are thinkers. They're thinking in that dual sense, thinking using their minds and tinkering, working on material. You have KRS-One. a famous hip-hop artist. This was a song in the 80s, where he said, "What is this black thing? This Negro coming from Spain, that's not who you are." In his Heal, which was a movement to actually educate persons next to the music by doing workshops, he speaks about this notion of black and white. And I'd like to let you listen to 2 minutes, so we're doing this intertextually, 2 minutes of him actually giving one of these courses. In Amsterdam, I was fortunate to actually see Midnight give a similar kind of course. Midnight is a reggae formation with a similar argument.
This is white. This is white. If white people look like this, they be dead to the world. No human being can exist as a white man or woman. White. Could you imagine seeing a yellow man walk across the stage? Or maybe a red woman? Red, like the color red. This might seem stupid to look at. Now people aren't red and yellow and black and white. But somehow, based on the training, based on the education, we deal with each other like this every day. You're black, you're white, you're red, you're yellow. And according to the truth, none of us are any of the colors that we're saying we are. But yet we're willing to fight and die for whatever color you've been categorized into. I look at myself. I think I see brown. I think I see brown. The light that's coming off of my hand tells my eyes that this is brown.
You can stop it. So you see, if he's ever in the Netherlands again, I think you should invite him because he's a gifted speaker and a wonderful MC. What you get amongst the artists, the urban artists, you also get in academia. Here are two thinkers in academia that say generally the same thing. They say people became black. They were not black, as Achille Mbembe would say. If globalization is old, taking 12 million people from the African continent to the New World, the Americas, to move those persons against their will, you have to make them black. And black means make them an object that you can treat like a thing. The other thinker, Udell, from the Caribbean, he calls it the Spanish word Negro. There were no Negroes in Africa. Colonization made all this multiplicity Negro. Similarly as what KRS-One is saying. It means actually that if we think hard enough, you cannot see without words. You can't see without a framework that tells you this is what you're seeing. So people who tell me, but I see it, then I think, no, you actually have inherited a historical discourse that modifies your sight, plus the dominance of the vision, which is colonialism. Next slide. So which means, for Achille Mbembe, but also for Udell, but prior to that, for Cedric Robinson, already in the 1980s, he said, who were the first black people? Cedric Robinson was the author of the book Black Marxism. Black Marxism locates the first black people in Europe. He says it were the Slavs, then the Irish. And then when a new object needed to be created, it became the persons who lived on the continent of Africa. So blackness for black Marxism is this shifting category of making people objects. And from the 1600s, it became persons who look like me. They became the black people. We've inherited it. And the Black Atlantic speaks about that. It says, what did the people create that actually were made objects, that were made black? And the Black Atlantic, saying this is a new modern form of blackness, says modernity emerges in 1492. Because 1492 is when the Americas will be conquered, but 1492 is also when the Reconquista happens, when Europe ceases to have that long history of Islamic rule. They happen simultaneously. And that changes the globe. Next slide. So these are some slides of the Black Atlantic. If you want to understand global trade, this is how it started, the unequal trade, where raw materials from all parts of what used to be called the Third World usually are produced elsewhere. And many economies are flooded with cheap products coming from the developed world or the overdeveloped world. Next slide. When the US, the first post-colony, gained its independence, it too engaged in that same global trade. Next slide. We see where all the persons from Africa were heading to. You see also that there was a trade taking place amongst the Islamic empires around the same time. So this decimated Africa. Next slide. What it means for the Black Atlantic is that everything was moving already in the 1700s. Potato only became the staple food of the Netherlands because of the Black Atlantic. You couldn't have pizzas without tomatoes. And those tomatoes moved from Mexico and they landed in Italy, and now we say Italian pasta, tomatoes. Americans eat their hot dogs. There were no cows when the Amerindians were there. So the Black Atlantic says, we are all the products of this shift. We forget that we're the products of this shift, but we are the products of this shift. And that's what the thinkers of the Black Atlantic were at. This is what Gilroy was at. Next slide. I'm going to let you listen to a brief, let's say a minute, of a song to recognize what the Black Atlantic is talking about and what it's not talking about. This song you know. Still with me, right?
Get ready to wine! Get ready to wine! Follow my ding, ding, ding. Namya lama de, boko e jana, kapasi e jana, dago e jana, ding, ding, ding. Namya lama de, boko e jana.
Stop. Back to the tune. Back to the tune. Now, we know this tune. This tune tells us how we should understand the Black Atlantic and how we should not understand it. If you start by saying, this is a Surinamese tune, deeply Surinamese because she's talking or singing Srantongo, even though it's a Barbados artist, then you're not thinking the Black Atlantic. Thinking the Black Atlantic would say nothing that emerge can be exclusively national or exclusively ethnic. Because the Faloma is the Spanish Paloma. And to sing Surinamese is to sing a mixture of Yoruba Akans and English and all other types of languages that it transformed. Fawaka, far you did walk. That's what's going on in that language. So it cannot be national. That's what the Black Atlantic is saying. The moment you think national or think exclusively ethnic, then you have not understood the Black Atlantic. Then you're talking about national cultures, as Chris was talking about. Still, even though the Black Atlantic is a paradigm, the dominant paradigm, the dominant rhythm in which we are educated is to think of the world in civilizational blocks. So we think there is an African civilization underneath the Sahara, and we think there's the MENA, which is North Africa and the Middle East, and so forth. This is how we think. But that's because we are schooled in this way, to think this way, and that becomes our default position in thinking about things and trying to go back to a kind of genesis of how they emerged. A thinker that I read a lot in the past, Emmanuel Levinas, when asked what is racism, he said racism is our inherited universality. If we think the world this way, you're in racism and you never get out of it. That's what it is. Because then you think the world in civilizational blocks. It meant that you have to unthink. And one of the thinkers that has been unthinking the world is Edouard Glissant. Next slide. So then you reason against race, because you have to go against everything you learned. That's what the Black Atlantic is about. Next slide. This is Edouard Glissant. Edouard Glissant, in a rough translation, would say, you must stop thinking in continents. You have to think in archipelagos. Europe is an archipelago. That means there are different parts that are connected to each other, and they're connected through a sea, so there's movement. You know the archipelago like the Caribbean? He sees Europe in that archipelago way. He says archipelagic thinking is a thinking which recognizes singularities but thinks of them through the sea moving between them. So it's against terra-centric thinking. Whenever we think culture, we locate it to a land. And aquacentric thinking says no, next to the land there was sea and things were moving. In that, he would say archipelagos are constantly being born. So if you think an archipelago in Europe, and that archipelago will not be only located in Europe, you would say, if you listen to the tune Jaja, you know the song Jaja? Who knows the song Jaja here? Many do, some don't. Let's play the song and then we'll go back to this slide. Archipelago and archipelagic thinking. It will say, with this artist, Aya Nakamura, to think Europe, you have to think Paris and Mali. Those are two places in it, two islands. But Aya Nakamura takes her name from Hiro Nakamura. So you have to think also Japan. And you have to think that there is an American series which he locates himself in Los Angeles. And you have to recognize that even though Jaja is the name of the person that mistreated her, the way it's sung and the way many people understand it, they think it's about Jamaica, Jaja. So suddenly you get a different archipelago, and that is where you start to think. But that means you unloose yourself of racial thinking when you think archipelagic, because things happen, things are moving. And that means, as another thinker would say, hip-hop is not possible without the Wu-Tang Clan, and without the Wu-Tang Clan dealing with Bruce Lee. And all those movies that as a kid I looked at, Bolo and Bruce Lee and Jim Kelly and so forth, that's part of it. That went into breakdancing. So suddenly China, Hong Kong is also part of that mix that was happening then. Next slide. What that means is that we have to think differently about our collective identity. We are all products of that mixture that took place, that clash. It doesn't mean that we are all the same. How we deal with the nativo and the conquistador within us, Frantz Fanon comes in here. Frantz Fanon, that very important thinker who fought in Algeria, he says, the revolution is not only outside of yourself, it's also internally, because you are a product of that. So we have to find a way of balancing that. That's what this is about, our collective inheritance. Next slide. And now I'm coming to an end. What we see is that this Black Atlantic cultural expression that emerged, it has gone global and it's becoming mainstream. In the Jim Crow US, you did not have an Oprah Winfrey. Now you have an Oprah Winfrey. Now you have a Jay-Z. So which means blackness will have to change. Something will have to happen. Remember I said that blackness is what is in Black Marxism, how the object moves. It will have to change. Now this is thinking, next slide. Mbembe, in that same book, where he says in the 1600s people became black, he also says, I'm seeing that it's loosening and more people are becoming black. The devenir negre du monde, the becoming black of the world. So you see a generalization taking place, and that means more and more people, this is the whole struggle of the 1%, more and more people are being placed on the outside and being treated as objects. What he sees is also what urban artists see. Next slide. This is a dream. The Dream had a song I lived 3 years ago, which was about this. Almost the same time as Achille Mbembe's book comes out. This is blackness for him. All the instances of blackness.
I feel real black right, real black right. I feel real black right, real black right. I feel real black right now. I never knew you like I should've known you. But my father spoke of you through that liquor. Can we get a curtain call? Let us pray your idea outlives you. 'Cause everywhere there's a Chicago.
So the clip shows all these blacks, and then it shows at the end this. Please, play it. Yeah. So Achille Mbembe's Becoming Black of the World, one of the urban artists is saying, we're seeing something similar. And you don't have to go to the Dream for that. You can go earlier to Ice-T and his tune of Black, where the Korean is black and the others are black because there's a class warfare taking place. But, and this is my penultimate slide. In the book I argue, well, if we've seen the heavy commercialization of black Atlantic cultures, then blackness shifts. It's not only about subjection anymore. It has become a meta-identity. And that means that the people of the culture industry, capitalists, they don't only sell the music, they sell an identity too. They commodify the identity. So you get a meta-identity that I call urban blackness. And this meta-identity you also find in the Netherlands. It means that it grafts itself on existing identities. No one says I'm urban black. It's a performed identity. So you have urban black grafting itself upon ideas of Moroccanness. Urban black grafting itself upon ideas of Antilleanness. Urban black grafting itself upon ideas of native Dutch. You can't be urban black if you don't buy the commodities, dress the style, and walk the walk. That's a new development that's taking place. And you see it being sold continuously. Therefore, the phonixes and so forth, and the mainstreaming of urban blackness, that's what we're seeing happening. In the Netherlands, but globally as well. That's a particular rhythm. Next slide. You see it amongst the urban artists because they're telling you something is changing. You need new eyes, and all that means is new words and new discourses to actually tell you what you're seeing. This is the capitalist message of it, because it's not a beautiful story only. It is a story with lots of violence in it. Next slide.
Chance, what's good? Bless up. Of course. Please do me a favor.
It stops. Oh, okay. It's coming again.
Chance, what's good? Bless up. Of course. Please do me a favor. Do me the biggest favor. Matter of fact, do yourself the biggest favor. Let Justin Bieber know, let Wayne know, and let Quavo know. My house. We're gonna celebrate life, success, and our blessings.
truth, the money never lie, no. I'm the one, yeah. I'm the one early morning in the dawn. Know you wanna ride now. I'm the one, yeah. I'm the one, yeah. Hear you sick of all those other imitators. Don't let the only real one intimidate ya. See you watching, don't run out of time now. I'm the one, yeah. Ooh, ooh, ooh. I'm the one, ooh, ooh, ooh. I'm the only one, ooh, ooh, ooh. I'm the one, ooh, ooh, ooh. I'm the only one,
Quavo. I'm the one that hit that same spot. She the one that bring them raindrops. We go back, remember crisscross and hopscotch.
If you look at urban blackness, this is an example of it. All of them are urban black. Each one of them. It makes no sense when you talk about DJ Khaled to begin about, well, he's Middle Eastern and so forth. He's just urban blackness. They're all playing that same role, and all of them are engaged in that same suaveness, that same hypeness. In the Netherlands, you have the same phenomena taking place. We don't have so much time, so I'm not going to show the... let me show 1 minute of the clip.
Ik blow een stuk, wat een spatse gedrag. Op die flipdeck met een bitch en een fles. Wat een spatse gedrag. Je hebt beef met je pieken, joh.
Yeah, you'll find all the artists in that. Now, back, last one, back again. Okay, yeah, all right, no. Let's go to the last one, and then let me wrap up. What I'm trying to get across, and this is something we can talk about today, is that if you take this seriously as a particular perspective of a rhythm taking place in the Netherlands, you're seeing something interesting happening. You're seeing actually a divergence happening. On the one hand, we have a whole set of persons that are extremely, in the vocabulary, woke, activist. They speak the language of anti-racism, against populism, and with a whole set of terms like microaggression and so forth, whitesplaining, mansplaining, etc., etc. They are following the route and actually reacting to what is taking place in the realm of governance, the realm of political parties. Capital is doing something else. And many of the urban artists in the world, from the Jay-Z's, you see it with the new NFL deal, they're following the route of capital. They're transforming the game. These two worlds are not necessarily meeting. They meet once in a while with Winner, but they're not necessarily meeting. That is taking place in the Netherlands, and I think if one wishes to do anti-racist work in the Netherlands, you will have to recognize this divergence and find a way of actually connecting these two. Because otherwise, generally, as it works, mostly the economic will have its hand, and it will transform things, and it will not transform it for the better, because it will be a new racialization that's taking place, and a whole lot of subjugation of a whole lot of persons, with all the hipness that's taking place that you can see in the clips. So I think in thinking the Black Atlantic, that's what it offers. It offers us a way of recognizing something has changed and doing politics in an anti-essentialist way. I should stop there. Thanks.
Francio Guadalupe. I could listen to this for hours, to you, to the music, to the art. When is the book coming out?
In October 2020. I can't force it to do it quick.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll have to wait a bit.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. There's so much I could ask, but we have 3 people here who we have invited to respond off the top of their head to this syncopated engagement with the Black Atlantic. To begin with, Shruti Bala. Shruti Bala is Associate Professor of the Deputy of Theatre Studies here at the University of Amsterdam, so in a sense they're colleagues.
Yeah, certainly are.
She coordinates the MA Theatre Studies program, and yesterday you appeared together with Maarten van Hinten at a theater festival here at the Schouwburg at the Need for Legacy program, where you gave a keynote on how to teach the history of theater in current times, how to broaden the perspective of education. And Facebook tells me you nailed it.
Facebook.
Shruti Bala has published on questions like, to what extent is the discipline of theater and performance studies still imperialist? What are the ways of acknowledging absences and invisibilities? How does embodied knowledge become knowable? I think there's a lot that you can talk about, so floor is yours, Shruti.
Okay. Thanks, Chris, and thank you very much, Francio, for a very broad range of ideas and a very thoughtful, careful kind of your own forming your own kind of archipelago of connections and ideas across the Caribbean, across thinkers from the Caribbean, as well as trying to bring that to the Netherlands and what that means there. So, yeah, I've taken a few notes, and for the sake of having an interesting discussion, I'm not going to scratch your back, and I'm going to play the Marxist I've been trained to be from India, and speak about a few things which I stumble over and I feel slightly uncomfortable about. And also, I'm troubled about it in the way you are formulating it. Or maybe I'm not even troubled. I'm not even sure yet if I should be troubled, but I'll try to formulate it as a question, as questions then. So the very first thing that comes out of the gut of my stomach is you closed with this definition of urban blackness as hyper-commercialized meta-identity that's positively connoted, and that's popular. It's a popular identity. It grafts upon various different kinds of mixtures, yet it's hyper-commercialized. And I would add to that, based on all the examples that you have given, I find the commercialization and the commodification is particularly stark in the case of the body of the woman. So it's not just about blackness, but also about the female body as a commodity. And if we link this to the history of slavery, I think in the broadest terms, Paul Gilroy and others have acknowledged that slavery, the history of slavery is to be thought of in syncopation with the history of patriarchy, the history of the seeing a woman's body as commodity, to be owned as property. So I'm wondering how, what has been overcome in this idea, if the syncopation, overcoming of slavery, reclaiming blackness as a positive tool, in fact also comes along with another form of commodification, or retaining another form of commodification of the woman's body, specifically the black woman's body. So I struggle with this, and I struggle with the place of the continuing importance of commodity in any kind of thinking of blackness, whether positive or negative. So I really wonder, aren't there other, to me, I'm sitting right opposite Faustin here, who's a absolutely brilliant choreographer and performer, and to me his Faustin's dance work is an example of urban blackness too, which however has absolutely nothing to do with, or in my reading of it, very little to do with the commodification of bodies, but about answering to that utopian call of the archipelago of connections in a very different way, very historicized way. So that's one problem I'm having. How do we deal with this question of the commodity? Mm-hmm. The second question I'm asking myself is, okay, to begin with, for me, the notion of the Black Atlantic also tied together with thinkers like Glissant, thinking against the terracentric, thinking in oceanic terms, other concepts that have come out of creolite, negritude, all these ideas, they are hugely, extremely important for, in terms of understanding, historically understanding, not just the connections across the Atlantic, but also equally the place of the Indian Ocean in this. So also relevant, say, to people like me from India who are coming at this, coming to understand the Caribbean from another geographical place. But the way in which you have been talking about it, the question that comes to my mind is, yes, we need to embrace this kind of we need to think beyond national boundaries and boundaries about skin color and ethnocentrism, absolutism about any kind of identitarian position. But maybe what do we do about specificity? How can we try to keep some space for some specificity, some particularity, singularity, to speak with Glissant, which is not about the archipelagic, and it's also not about the roots in the sense of origin and purity and so on, but about a historical specificity which is not comparable necessarily on terms of equal. So, which is about asymmetry of all these different archipelago, all these kind of hybrid Creole connections. How to make place for this is perhaps the question I'm asking. Because, and I think this is one of the big problems within the left at the moment. And you really also addressed this towards the end when you said, well, and also in the beginning, saying, well, you have this, you have a way of, we have on the one side those who are there about critiquing racism, anti-racism, and wokeness, and anti-imperialism, and all the rest of it. But let's move away from that and look at a more rhythmical analysis. You began with that idea. Where's the place for asymmetry and historical specificity in this conception?
Yeah. So can we leave it there?
Yeah, fine. Yeah?
These are two very serious questions. Yeah. And Francie, I would have to ask you to keep your answers fairly brief.
I'm going to answer that before. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm glad you didn't scratch my back. But here's a response. The response is to say that what I am describing is the commodification of the body, the self-commodification of one's body. That's what I'm describing. Now, you can say that there are other examples of this, but I'm speaking about the culture industry and the dominant mode of this. Yes, it's misogynistic. And then I would take gender in masculine, feminine forms, and I would say you can find similar ways with artists that we would consider female, like Beyonce and so forth. There's a similar something going on. Now, one can say, I don't like it and we shouldn't look at it, but I think we should recognize that something is happening, attend to it, and then ask ourselves, how do we intervene, attending to this transformation that we are seeing? That's what I'm saying. Now, when one looks at specificity, there are two ways of answering this issue. One way is that the way of Glissant, which you mentioned and which I mentioned as well, Glissant would say every retour to try to reach specificity is a detour because you actually have to start with a particular entanglement. So there's not a specificity of a particular group of people. It's a particular entanglement that you're dealing with. And therefore, even though the roots are not under the ground, he would agree, he would say the roots are submarine. That means they're moving in the water, they're accumulating things, and they're letting go of things. And if you can start with that, then you have a specificity. The specificity of Broederliefde, when they say Maluku, it's a specificity that brings in the Dutch context, the Lusophone reality. It brings in a Portuguese reality. But it's a particular kind of specificity. A specificity that, even though you would say the Netherlands didn't have a direct relationship with Santo Domingo plays a role at this moment in time. So it's a particular kind of specificity, and you would have to work with that specific kind of specificity, but you can't give specificity back to essentialist thinking. You have to say a specificity that congeals certain things, let go of certain things, brings certain things together. So that's the specificity that I think one would have to deal with. And last, as troubling as this is, it is supposed to be troubling because it's supposed to ask us to think again and to not only engage with what we like, but to also engage with the things we don't like, but that are happening. We might.
I don't know if Shruti,
You're going to respond again.
I guess you're still a bit troubled here and there. Just one more thing to clarify for all of us, I think. I was thinking more or less the same when you were speaking. This commodification of the meta-identity of urban blackness, including its misogyny. You just said, very briefly, we have to think how to intervene.
Yeah.
So how do we intervene?
I think that you intervene by actually, next to the politics of fulfillment, so next to taking the categories that we have inherited and dealing with them and saying we have to hold power accountable, there is a politics of transfiguration. And the politics of transfiguration, again, Gilroy or Celia Ben Habib, says, in this mixing merger, we'll have to let go, and there are risks to be taken. We don't know where we're going to get, but we're going to get somewhere else when we start to let go of particular essentialist modes of thinking and particular inherited traditional modes of thinking that tie themselves to existing identities. So you would need the politics of fulfillment, but next to the politics of fulfillment, you need the politics of transfiguration. You need both. And the politics of transfiguration are not necessarily legible in regular terms.
Thanks. Let's move on because you've been listening and you have questions. Priscilla Vaudel, she is a theater maker. She's the co-founder with Tim van der Heuvel, who couldn't be here, although your son is here with us, 1 year old, of the young Amsterdam-based theater company Lost Project. And there he is, yes. So...
Yes.
It
was his cue.
He didn't like it.
No, he's annoyed that I forgot his name. What's his name?
Blazy Joe.
Blazy Joe.
Yes.
Cool. Your theater company or collective is Lost Project.
Yes.
You've produced performances like Man Down, like The World Is Yours.
Yes.
Young makers, performers from Amsterdam, you celebrate difference.
Of course.
Which we can see in all the performances you do. You tackle taboos, fears, stereotypes. You work with your own stories, lives, and bodies. It is all about Amsterdam today.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it links into a lot of what Francio was saying.
Yeah.
And you just returned 2 days ago from Suriname,
yeah,
where you worked and performed with your company and actors from local actors.
Yeah.
So it's amazing that you're here.
Yeah.
It's very brave that you're here.
I'm still in a jet lag, so excuse me if I'm
Jet lags make people lucid, so go ahead, Priscilla.
Yeah, I want to do it in Dutch. because I'm speak from the heart, and it's difficult for me to think about English and then speak from my heart. So is het goed dat ik het in het Nederlands doe en dat jij het in...
Should I translate a bit for you?
Ja. Het eerste wat mij direct connecte met wat jij zei, en daar wil ik je ook voor bedanken, is dat er een cultuur op dit moment is, een identity op dit moment is, die men nog niet kent. Het is een identiteit die door de nieuwe generatie Nederlander, Amsterdammer in mijn geval, gecreëerd wordt door alles wat ons mee heeft gebracht tot de dag van vandaag. Roots is daar een enorme drive in. En dat heeft ook de muziek hedendaags gebracht. We worden daar nog niet voor erkend. En waar ik het heel erg met jou mee eens ben, is dat we de erkenning ook daadwerkelijk mogen krijgen voor alles wat ons meebrengt. Ongeacht welke kleur we in deze hedendaagse tijd hebben. We zijn gevormd door onze koloniale geschiedenis. En doordat we gevormd zijn door onze koloniale geschiedenis, heeft dat een nieuwe generatie gebracht met een andere identiteit dan de identiteit die wij kennen of die ons opgedrongen wil worden. En het eerste wat ik dacht toen ik jouw lezing hoorde was, hoe kan dat eigenlijk? Hoe kan het dat wij met z'n allen een geschiedenis dragen die wij allemaal gemeen hebben met elkaar, ongeacht welke kleur, en wij die erkenning niet krijgen voor het zijn van die nieuwe generatie met die nieuwe identiteit? Het lijkt, en dat zei ik ook tegen Maarten van Hintenet, het lijkt alsof wij een nieuw systeem zijn als nieuwe generatie in een ontzettend oud, verroest systeem. En dat onwijs moeilijk is om ons daarin te kunnen bewegen. Ik praat veel met jongeren, ik werk heel veel met jongeren. Ik luister naar hun verhalen, hun geschiedenis, hun struggles en hun onwijze grote dromen. En het raakt mij om te weten dat zij op dit moment enorm struggelen met het feit dat zij hun eigen identiteit niet meer in beeld kunnen brengen. Omdat dat enorm bepaald is door alles waar wij mee zijn opgegroeid, waar wij vandaan komen en hoe wij onszelf hebben ontwikkeld deze hedendaagse tijd. We gaan naar de universiteiten. We leren, educaten onszelf. Onze ouders hebben ontzettend hun best gedaan om ons van alles te leren. Om ons als wereldburger neer te zetten. Maar ook wij weten niet. Wij kunnen ons niet meer identificeren met waar onze ouders vandaan komen. Omdat we zo ver doorontwikkeld zijn door de manier waarop wij zijn opgegroeid. Hoe kan het dat in deze tijd ons nog steeds niet de erkenning gegeven wordt voor het feit dat wij deze nieuwe generatie zijn? Een generatie die wegens van allerlei verschillende omstandigheden hier in een land zijn gekomen, in een stad zijn gekomen als Amsterdam. Waar wij onze geschiedenis horen in de gebouwen in Amsterdam. Waar wij onze medestudenten, je wordt in dezelfde ziekenhuizen geboren. Je zit op dezelfde scholen, je leert dezelfde dingen. Hoe kan het dat wij niet een gezamenlijke identiteit kunnen creëren en een gezamenlijke identiteit hebben? Waarop cultuur enorm gebouwd is. Waarop creativiteit enorm gebouwd is. Ik kan een beetje Marokkaans, Turks, Surinaams, Afrikaans. Nederlands is mijn moedertaal geworden. Ingeslagen in de tijd van de slavernij. Ik had geen keus om een andere taal te praten dan Nederlands. Mijn ouders hadden geen keus om een andere taal te praten dan Nederlands. Hoe kan het dat in zo'n diverse stad als Amsterdam er nog steeds geen gezamenlijke identiteit heerst? Dat jij, net als ik, dezelfde ziekenhuis, dezelfde educatie en dus onze creativiteit op dezelfde manier kunnen uiten. Allemaal gevoed door alles waar we vandaan komen. Jouw lezing raakt me, omdat ik niet begrijp waarom dit nog steeds niet is en mag zijn. Een nieuw systeem binnen een oud systeem. Dus ik snap u als u zegt van, maar we zetten de vrouw heel neerbuigend neer. Maar het is wel wat gevoed wordt hier in de mainstream. Vrouwen, de Afrikaanse roots van muziek, de beat, je voelt het. We dansen er allemaal op. De jonge generatie, ik heb 12-jarigen die danst op dit muziek, die luistert naar dit muziek. Van niks draait inderdaad geen fresco, maar ze draaien liever FSB. Snap je? Maar alleen al het feit, als we zouden kunnen zeggen dat dat onze cultuur is, dat dat onze identiteit is, zou al heel veel met zich meebrengen. Ondanks we het niet eens zijn met alles wat ze ons laten zien en laten horen, maar er zit onze roots in. We voelen in alles dat we van Travassi tot aan Kaseko tot aan alles in die muziek kunnen horen. Dat is waarom we erop blijven bewegen, ondanks we het niet eens zijn met de tekst en de beelden. Als wij dat zouden kunnen eigenen en onze identiteit kunnen maken, dan zouden we zoveel meer erkenning voelen voor dat wat wij zijn en hebben gebracht. Zo ook met de Marokkaanse muziek, Turkse muziek, Arabische muziek. Alles wat op dit moment populair wordt gemaakt. Maar nog steeds niet als onze identiteit wordt gezien en wij nog steeds niet de erkenning krijgen voor het feit dat dat is wie wij zijn. En wat wij hebben gebracht. En zoveel rijkdom. Ik zeg niet voor niets, we vieren de verschillen. Klinkt super politiek en super cheesy eigenlijk. Maar in de kern klopt dat nog steeds. Black Atlantic, het klopt. We zijn beïnvloed door van alles. Alleen deze jonge generatie is lost. Lost omdat ze niet erkend worden in dat alles wat ze met zich meebrengen. En dat is waarom ik me ontzettend verbonden voel met wat jij net zei. En heel belangrijk vind dat we die nieuwe identiteit met elkaar zichtbaar gaan maken. Of we het nou altijd eens zijn of niet. Maar de erkenning voor de jonge mensen is ontzettend belangrijk om de nieuwe generatie te kunnen vormen.
Thank you, Priscilla. I'll just respond briefly because I think we have to have a conversation. I'll just respond briefly because I think we have to have a conversation. It's on, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and everyone can hear me. Let me respond briefly by recalling when I was a kid running home, there was the time of South Africa, the apartheid time. And the West Indies cricket group, some cricketers had went to South Africa to make money, and now there was a ban on that. And that was excitement, so I was coming home and my grandmother was busy sweeping, so I was trying to tell her what was going on, and she simply said, you know, we're all in the mud. And it took a while for me to grasp what she meant, but when I figured out, she meant, and that's the politics that I still keep, that no one can claim holy ground. We all are in the mix, and you work from out of the mix. So don't expect to find Shangri-La in anything. You find the contradictions, and you work within those contradictions. We're all in that mud. Now, that's what I'm trying to get at. Secondly, you are correct. Gilroy has another book in which he talks about conviviality. And that term, conviviality, emerged because he said, how is it possible, what you're saying, that all the analysis I'm seeing is about struggle, when in the neighborhoods, somehow they're finding ways of gelling.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, let's look at this analysis. What are they doing? What is this thing that's emerging, that emerged in Dutch neighborhoods when I was doing my field work, that in the 80s, these kids were playing football together. They found a way of creating a sound, which was, and a cultural expression, which was theirs. Brass band, I wrote a little piece on brass bands in Rotterdam. These kids came in, they started to play these brass bands. No one was interested in doing the analysis of them, but commerce was.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have the battle of the drums.
Mm-hmm.
We still in academia take our high ground and say, I don't deal with that. But commerce has dealt with it, they've commercialized it, they've made it a meta-identity, and perhaps it's now time for us to actually engage. And not only shun it, but say, I too am in the mud. I'm too in the contradiction. I need to find a way of dealing with it.
Yeah.
Shruti, would you like to respond to this passionate call for recognition of an identity, even if it contains elements that you don't agree with?
Oh no, I absolutely appreciate that you brought it in and you formulated it in this way. I think I couldn't agree with you more. I'm just trying to speak to it from somewhere from outside, from, let's say, from the point, but also in terms of this discussion between, say, the question of gender in connection to the question of race. And how does that link play out, and especially when commodity comes in before all the academics do, which they're anyway very late and anyway out besides the point. But I am more inclined to be more careful about relativizing the position of the woman's body.
Okay.
Ja.
Not to compromise on that too much.
Nee, ik snap precies wat je bedoelt en ik ben het ook eens. Ik ben het eens. Ik zou willen dat alle jonge meiden veel meer zichzelf zouden dragen.
Yeah.
Tegelijkertijd leef ik in een tijd waarin er lippen gespoten worden om groter te zijn. Waarin er implantanten in billen gedaan wordt om groter te zijn. Ik leef in een tijd waarin de commerciële wereld aan het overnemen is. Geëigend wordt door de elitaire wereld. De boxbraids, kwikwiba, zeggen we gewoon. Voorheen werd je uitgelachen op school, als je dat had. Ingevlochten haren. Nu is het een hype. Omdat toevallig een van de celebrities besloten heeft, wit van huidskleur, om die in te doen. Ik zou willen dat de jonge mensen snappen dat dat nog steeds hun roots is. Dus ook al is het zo dat het nu op een hele negatieve manier wordt geuit, hoop ik dat de jongeren van nu, de nieuwe generatie van nu, ook kan inzien dat het allemaal nog steeds voortkomt uit waar zij mee zijn gebracht. Dat het nu door iemand anders wordt geëigend, wil nog niet zeggen dat jij minder bent, want misschien ben je wel de creator van dit alles. Van dit alles.
Thanks.
Ik snap je.
Thanks. You got that, yeah? Yeah. Faustin, then Yakula, finally, third responder to you before we open it up. Of course, I think everybody here in Amsterdam now knows you and your work since you were what is it called, associate artist of the Holland Festival last summer, together with William Kentridge from South Africa. Dancer, choreographer, theater maker, storyteller, based in Kisangani, Congo, where you have your studio Kabako. But you work on all sides of the Atlantic, I think, and Maarten describes your work as it is, in whatever form it takes, it's always a reflection on written and unwritten histories. I am curious to hear how you respond to Francio's keynote.
Maybe at this stage and after Shruti's and Priscilla's responses, what's really rushing, a lot of thoughts are rushing in my head right now. But maybe one persistent question is, where do I personally stand in the middle of all this? So that I don't talk about this from that space of like knowledge or information, but from the space of throwing my own body in the battle or rolling in the mud, you know, as you know, Francio just, you know, rightly said it, quoting you said it, quoting your grandmother. At this table, the only one who was born in Africa and who holds, you know, like a passport from one of the nations from there. And my experience of like moving around the Atlantic, whether in the Americas or in Europe, was that I'm viewed as the one who has a stable identity because I was born there. And so like in North America, it's like, oh, you come from the motherland, so, you know. And this idea of Africa as a stable place, a stable identity, has been conveniently also promoted by Africans, you know. Already in 1956, when there was the first Congress of black intellectuals and artists in Paris, organized by Alioune Diop, Senghor, Césaire, and all that, Senghor made this speech, which was like one of the landmarks, where he was basically demonstrating how stable traditions are on the continent and how the link with the ancestors informs everything. And the way it was presented, the diasporic experience was almost, you know, felt like a threat to the stability of the identity. And somehow we kept with that, and also all the political propaganda of the fathers of independence on that continent maintained that. But for me, in my own personal journey, waking up in 1997 and hearing on the radio that that country that had known as Zaire had changed names, shattered all that stability. It's like, no way. On the 16th of May, 1997, I was a Zairean. On 17th of May, I had to learn to say that I'm Congolese. So suddenly it's like, nothing is stable. What does it mean? And so if I say I am a Congolese, what does that mean? And so if I enter this Black Atlantic dance, what can I possibly bring? And now I tend to say that it is a certain awareness of ruins as my main heritage. And maybe this is the only thing that makes it possible for me to connect to the diasporic experience. It's like the experience of of ruins. The context may be different, but that's our main heritage. It's a pile of ruins. But then there is this question, what do I do about it? Am I ready to take my responsibility with these ruins and attempt to build even like a temporary shelter? So some years ago, I was in Senegal, actually. It was like 16 years ago. And a Senegalese journalist asked me, like, yeah, how would you define your dance? And without thinking about it, it's like, oh, it's an attempt to remember my name. And then suddenly I was like, oh, what? Did I just say that? Okay. So it took me time to understand what I'd uttered so easily. It's like, oh, it's an attempt to remember my name. And with time, I came to realize is that maybe because I grew up in a dictatorship, and the very nature of a dictatorship is that individuals do not exist. We're just part of the bunch, and we have to follow the only individual in that society, which is the dictator. But this goes actually beyond Mobutu or Kabila, it goes beyond that because it says something about the colonial project itself. Actually, Mobutu was just continuing the Leopoldian system, that system of commodification of human beings just at the service of a certain ideology or commerce. And so King Leopold II did it, Mobutu did it. And so for as long as you don't see an individual in front of you, you can do anything you want with them for what is good for you. And so having grown up in such a system where the individual simply does not exist, for me, now it's all about trying to find a way of saying my name is. And maybe then, with my consciousness of ruins, if I can be able to say my name is, knowing that it's an attempt to remember what this name is, really. Because, yeah, the whole colonial project was to negate that space of saying my name is. So how can I today, knowing what I know, attempt to say my name is? And how can I make it possible for people around me to also make some space where they can say my name is? And then, therefore, how can we possibly get some circulation? Because what I find fascinating about names is that if you're serious about them, you just cannot collapse into yourself. Because every name opens a web of relationships to people, to place, to history. Because, hey, today I'm known as Lignekula, and this is like my family name. But actually, when you look into it, you realize that it's a colonial heritage. No Belgians is called now Lignekula. That's not what I mean. But what I mean is that the family name tradition is a colonial institution. Until the 30s, it did not exist in the Congo. My grandfather was called Lignekula, and one of his siblings was called Mangubo. And so after the 30s, they started these families. So you have the Lignekula and you have the Mangubos. What from the name can you say that will tell you that these guys are not siblings? And so if you're serious about names, you can never collapse into yourself. And it's always about reactivating these connections. And so if I start from that tiny individual who's trying to understand that space where on that little space of the earth that they stand on, if they can figure out the ways of connecting and building bridges, and so that ultimately I'm not coming as the Congolese, because I don't know what Congo is. I really don't know. And maybe that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's constantly about trying to understand these ruins and trying to build a temporary shelter with these ruins that I received from history and from my fathers. Because, yeah, unfortunately, or luckily, I didn't receive any ruins from my mothers. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And in fact, history makes it that the mothers just don't exist. Mm. You know, and I'll end at that because 2-3 years ago, for the first time in my life, I traveled to the village where my maternal grandfather was born. It's a village called Banataba, 150 kilometers south of Kisangani. He left Banataba in the 30s. He never really went back there. He died in the city. My mother went there in 1975. That's the last time he went there. Mm-hmm. And I happened to be in New York, invited by the Metropolitan Museum to propose a performance, and I saw in their collection that there was a Lengola sculpture. And so it's like, I want to work to build something as a conversation with this sculpture, which for them was not even important, it was in the storage. And it's like, this is the most important piece in this museum for me, because it's probably the only one that can tell me something about who I am, because my mother is Lengola. I've never been to the village where my grandfather came from, and I went there, and that journey helps me like connect to many generations. Now I know names of ancestors that can take me to when the first Arab slave traders got to that region, when the first Belgian guy called Pontier got there. You know, I can, but of all those names, there isn't a single woman. And so I made a performance which was just ending with the question, where are our women? Mm-hmm. What have we done to our women? And so, yeah, so maybe it's good that they're not part of these ruins. Mm. Yeah.
But you shared the stage with a woman in that performance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we're running late, yeah? Let's open it up. The idea was that you could join us in this conversation, but we need a little bit of breathing space, so we've created a 10-minute, let's say, dance act for you, which is straight out of the rehearsal studio, where Right About Now Inc. is working at the moment, and you spent the whole day with them today, Faustin, on their new production called Status. Status is going to premiere in the 25th of September in the Nieuwe de la Mar Theater, no less. The flyer is on your chair, so let's all go. We'll see the 3 dancers from this performance on stage. Linar Eugenia, Tayeb Ben Amara, Andy Adriana Solo. We'll hear the voice of Hans Dagelet. Unfortunately, the other actor, Anton de Bies, is not here today. DJ Love Supreme is among the audience, and the creators of this performance are Maarten van Hinten, Marjorie Boston, and choreographer Babacar Cissé. So let's have a look, 10 minutes on stage, a preview of Status. It's okay. Toch, dat durven we wel aan. We durven wel hier te blijven zitten.
Donker. Ik ga naar binnen. Propvol. Ik ben alleen. K, 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 K. De klaver sleept me mee. Je stond voor me voor ik er erg in had. Je oogopslag, de zee. Hier hadden ze me voor gewaarschuwd. Blijf in het hotel, hadden ze gezegd. Het is gevaarlijk, hadden ze gezegd. Ik voel het, maar het komt niet van jou. Het draait om je heen. Het trekt aan je. Het is donker. Kat en muis. Kat en muis. Kat en muis. Kat en muis. We worden bekeken. Alle hoofden glimmen van het zweet. Mijn ogen prikken. De zee.
parler de mon histoire, de destin, de dette. Tu me parlais avec ta belle voix ronde et nue, de ton français boiteux, sans jamais vraiment me demander ce que je pensais. Ce soir-là, j'ai compris. J'ai compris que jamais tu me demanderais ce que je pense. J'étais jeune. J'avais à peine 19 ans. J'étais follement amoureuse de toi. Mais j'en voulais pas ta dette. Non, j'en voulais pas. Je voulais un avenir au-delà de ton histoire. Un avenir d'ailleurs qui appartienne qu'à moi. C'est sur cette plage que j'ai décidé de faire ma traversée. Ne m'en veux pas, non. Ne m'en veux pas, non. Tout peut s'oublier qui s'enfuit déjà. Prends soin de toi. Prends soin de ton fils.
Tayeb, Linar, Andy, merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Dankjewel. We'll all see it in the Lamar Theatre. Status, a new production by Right About Now Inc. Of course, powered totally by the Black Atlantic ideas and experience. Thank you very much. Now, let's continue. If I can invite my guests again, I would suggest we take other places at the table so different people can admire our backs. Priscilla, kom je hier? Ja? And Faustin is here? Ah, he's just going to the bathroom. So, are you all still with us? Are you? Yeah? Okay, Martha and Marjorie are with us, so. Could we continue for, let's say, half an hour? Is that okay? Because now is the time that we would like you to join us here at this table. So anybody who would like to ask or comment on what has been said and shown so far, feel free, come and take a seat. You're welcome. We just have one rule. There always has to be one seat empty at the table in order for others to be able to step up on stage and take that. So if the table is full, one of us will have to step down momentarily. You can always come back. Who would like to join us up here to begin with? Who of all these shy people would like to? There you go, sir. Good evening. Please introduce yourself.
Okay. Hello. I don't know. Yeah, the thing is working. My name is Carl Steinmetz, so we know each other from mail and things like that. I really enjoyed this concept of the Black Atlantic. For me, it feels like a world which is beyond color, beyond countries, beyond continents, beyond gender, etc. But still, I do have a problem, and I like to raise that to all of you. This other world where we feel excluded, discriminated, not worthwhile. And I'm in particular busy with the educational field, where we will start a Truth Reconciliation Commission for the Netherlands in this area. Because you should remember that the kids and the grandchildren of immigrants, refugees, and also partly expats in this country are excluded for more than 60 years. So we need also concepts by which we are able to analyze this and find new entries. And I'm not sure whether this concept of the Atlantic blackness will help us. That's the main question. And I can go on for many areas, like I'm working in the area of crime. So there's worldwide, in the Western world mainly, a way of saying that immigrants are causing crime. It's done by Trump, it's done by Hungary, it's done in Australia, etc. It's not true if you look at the facts, but I'm using the old concepts in order to conquer people who are saying that. So, okay, please.
Is it Francio who would like to respond,
Francio,
or
anyone? Let's say, and I'm also very happy with the fact that we talked about, let's say, the women's body, because that's something which I didn't like, to tell you the truth. And we should also conquer patriarchism, because that's the end of the world if we go on like that. If males are getting so much responsibility that they can ruin our life.
I hear echoes in what you're saying, also your previous question in your
I said education,
earlier words.
Education, education, education. I think the Black Atlantic is... Ik ga het weer even in het Nederlands doen. Is het voorbeeld van hoe wij geëducate moeten worden. Ik denk dat op het moment dat wij met z'n allen de geschiedenis krijgen zoals die is, we meekrijgen met elkaar hoe al deze culturen zich hebben vermengd en uiteindelijk ook Nederland nog Amsterdam hebben gevormd. Dat we dan echt bezig zijn met eigen en de nieuwe identiteit voor onszelf creëren die nodig is om met elkaar te kunnen leven. Ik denk dat het ontzettend belangrijk is dat in de educatie daar al de Black Atlantic op die manier wordt geëducated. We hebben een geschiedenis samen. Dat wil niet zeggen dat jij het bent of dat ik het ben, maar dat wij samen een geschiedenis hebben. Daar moet echt, en ik hoor het in alle discussies, iedereen zegt het, maar ik weet niet hoe we hiervoor goed aan de bel moeten trekken. Je hebt mijn kind net horen huilen. Hij moet die geschiedenis op die manier meekrijgen. Krijgt hij dat niet op die manier mee, weet ik niet wat onze toekomst voor ons brengt. Maar dan denk ik dat een Trump en al die anderen geen kans meer hebben als wij de meerderheid gaan vormen voor die nieuwe identiteit. Because of the Black Atlantic.
Oké. Mooi. Who else? Who else? I know that you can't wait to join us, Marta and Marjorie. But let's. Here's
Femi.
Here you go, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening.
First instance.
Could you introduce yourself?
My name is Femi Dawkins. I'm an artist, poet, writer, agitator. The first instance is that the Black Atlantic is not a concept. That's something that's factual. The Black Atlantic existed, does exist. My colleague Raoul Balai is in the room. We are busy constantly with something called the Library of Light. Now, the Library of Light is about bringing new knowledge to light. And one of the things we postulated is that slavery happened. And everybody's telling you, and they say it in Dutch, you need the victimspeler. But if a victim is a victim, is a victim is a victim, the victim does not know how to be other thing than the victim. So we say we're not playing the victims. We say it exists, and from that existence, slavery existed, and from that came other things, ideas, the ruins. And so we try, and we continually try to bring different people from different parts of the diaspora to the pan-alphabet, the A's, the B's, the C's, the D's, all the way to the Z's. And in doing so, we bring things to life, meaning the victims no longer become the victims, but become the heirs of new and unusual ideas and positive technological growth and futures of all kinds of things, the Jay-Z's, you know, the Florence Nightingales and all these things. And so the Black Atlantic does exist, and it did exist, and people have passed. And one of the things that Paul Gilroy postulated, it says, all routes lead to your roots. And so we're all in this room now, leading each other in an Afrofuturistic way to our roots. And in doing so, we stumble across gender inequality, we stumble across the ruins of urban decay. The idea of urban is about white flight. What is white flight? During the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, whites left the cities and left it to urban decay. And thus, all the immigrants, the Jamaicans, Dominicans, the Haitians, all moved into the Bronx, Brooklyn, and all these other places that are now being re-gentrified to look like hipster colonies. These places became places where Cool Herc, you know, created hip-hop, 2 turntables and a microphone to get people to stop gang violence. They got together and they created something called hip-hop. They fused salsa, they fused Cuban music and all of that to create from that's where urban, the whites went to suburbia, so that's where the word urban comes from. So in that conversation, and in Congress, there's all this thing, reclaiming my time. And that's what we're doing now. We're reclaiming our time. And our time is about the evoluting, going 360 degrees around the ships that sail the Atlantic. And it's not a concept, it actually happened. We all have different last names. Our tongues have been confounded. We speak with wasp-stung lips. We can't even pronounce half the things we say, yet we say them. So when we talk about, for example, when they say the metaphysical and the commodification, Black men have been called meta-hypersexual, and hip-hop videos have, the formula is a brother, a sister, the singer, a rapper, a naked woman, a naked woman, a naked woman. And all those things are capitalized, and those things are parts of the formula for success. Now, you fast forward, you have the KRS-One and Dead Prez, and you have all these things, and those things have changed, yet we're not talking about them. So we need to start reclaiming our time, and reclaiming this time to be constructed about how do we gender equality, how do we equalize the game, how do we level the playing field, and how do we stop talking about immigrants and talking about impossibilities like going back to a time that's gone.
Okay. Go ahead. Since earlier today, you know, we had like a long phone call, and where, amongst other things, we're just talking about the terms we use to talk about people from the diasporas. And one of the things that you were saying was that, is it possible for someone from Africa to be an expatriate in Europe, or are we
continually
stuck in the immigrant status?
Yeah. Francio, you spoke to us about we need new words, and we got a great example here. I'll go.
Yeah.
So maybe you should comment. Oh, this should not become too much of an all-male table now, so I'm leaving for a minute.
I'd like to react to it,
yes,
if I may.
Just to tie into the point about the terminology of migration and immigrant, and what I like about the Black Atlantic concept is it's about movement.
Yes.
identity is movement. And when we talk in terms of immigrant, we talk about stasis, about things which are fixed, things which are added on or subtracted, when in fact none of that is fixed. And in fact, the very nature of the identity of, for example, this country is completely hodgepodge, has always moved. And it only became a discussion about when it became ethnic. So the country was shaped by migration. This country has always been, it's like kind of, all the rivers from Europe sort of end up in this river delta. So it's kind of like the way sewage goes to the sea, right? So this has always been a collection of stuff and people, and a hodgepodge collection of stuff and people, and which we can try to forge into a single national identity, but in fact that's, it's just simply not true. But of course it becomes very necessary when you think in terms of colonial racism. You need to define, okay, this is what we are and this is what they are, and they are going to be the migrants, and they're going to have to find ways to adapt. And I think opening up the concept, like you said, teaching the concept of Black Atlantic in schools means also simply saying you are allowed to say this is mine, I belong here, because I'm part of the movement. And if that movement is 1 generation ago, or 3 generations ago, or 6 generations ago, if it's I was a Huguenot, or if it's I'm a Ghanaian and my parents came 10 years ago, you are allowed to say this is my space, it's mine, I own it, I can live it, I can be here. That's what I wanted to connect to.
Okay, may I react
Yes,
to your intervention, which I like, by the way. Let's say beyond race, ethnicity, color, headscarf, etc., there's a different world. And the world, I'm raised in Indonesia, and I do have a Persian background. I do have a Jewish background too, and I do have an Indonesian background. So that's my background. I was raised with the idea that I'm dependent on other people. So by looking in your eyes, I see that I do exist. That's a key thing. The second thing is that the group is number one. I am never number one. The third thing is I need to have respect for people who are older than I am. So that's a different set of psychological rules compared to what you will find in individualism. I think beyond the world of, let's say, superficial things, which I may not call like that, I know, but there's a different world of which we don't have any clue. And I do call that, for instance, stress languages. So in every country, we have different words for stress and many other words, and there are different concepts, etc. We have hardly in the West any knowledge about these things. If we ignore this knowledge, if we ignore the ancient history of India, in this case, because that's 4,000 years or more old, then we are ignoring, let's say, that we are living. That's my answer. So I still need to understand how the Black Atlantic will help me to connect with, let's say, the different things in culture. To give you one example.
No, it's too much. Because somebody joined us here and she would like to,
okay,
I think.
Sorry, I'm leaving now.
No, you can stay, but you came up not for nothing, I'm sure.
No. Hi, everybody. I'm Lizzie. My question, something I think about a lot, is cultural appropriation. So please correct me if I'm misunderstanding this Black Atlantic, but because it points out our interconnected history and nature, then, is there such a thing as cultural appropriation anymore? How do we... I don't fully know how to formulate my question, so I hope you know what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. I guess it's time for me to answer. I'm going to answer and
you had Justin Bieber in there, so you really have to answer.
I'm going to answer, and what I have to say will be an answer, and there will be many other answers of it. I think that the Black Atlantic and the idea of cultural appropriation don't mix. I'll tell you why. I grew up with Rastafari. Rastafari is African. It has African presences in it. It has European presences in it. It has Indian presences in it. The ganja came through the indentured laborers. So I could not be Rasta if I believe in this cultural appropriation. What I do think the Black Atlantic goes together with is exploitation. And there are moments in which certain cultural products that are being created by persons are stolen. Then you have to do something about that because you're stealing something and you're making money off of a producer that produced that. The notion of cultural appropriation would be the notion that cultures belong to persons. And therein, if I can, so I think there is a cultural appropriation to me, whilst I recognize the work that it does, it remains too much in the gambit of capital, and it remains too much in the gambit of ownership. Whilst I think one would have to think differently about subjectivity, Rastafari, I universalism, and so forth. So it means a notion, you were talking about the Indonesian thing that you exist in relation to the other. I think that is a planetary thing. You find it in many different traditions. I do not believe that you can say Europe is this barren place that didn't have these kinds. They do, of course. So it's a question of recognizing that there's various kinds of spiritual traditions, trying to get these things to work, trying to, indeed, saying the Black Atlantic happened. It is our matrix. And how do you translate and bring this across in various fields? I like that Martin is bringing it across in the theater field. I try to do so in relation to the field of the university. I learned certain types of things. When I teach the Black Atlantic, I say, the Haitian Revolution was also an Islamic revolution because it was part of the Islam that came to the New World. Then I say, I can't grow up and think in relation to Islamophobia because someone who I grew up with, who was my sister, she's in the room, Saba, we grew up together. That's my connection. So the entanglement, when I think about specificity, it's the specificities of entanglement and the politics I do in relation to that entanglement. The abstractions, I don't necessarily, the racial abstractions, I don't necessarily engage in. I never engaged in them, so I don't know. I'm not going to start doing them now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're gonna say something.
Ja, ik wil gewoon iets delen. Ik ben nu even kijken, eergisteren uit Suriname gekomen. Ik ben 2,5 maand in Suriname geweest. En ik heb daar best wel een spirituele reis ook in gemaakt. Ik weet niet of jullie het kennen, maar de Winti-cultuur, Winti-geloof, is een ontzettend sterk geloof dat Afrikaanse oorsprong heeft. Dat is overgewaaid met alle, eigenlijk het koloniale, in ieder geval Winti-cultuur, Suriname is een geloofsstroom die aan het uitsterven is, waar mensen nog met man en macht proberen om het aan de volgende generatie door te geven. Ik heb daarin een spirituele reis gemaakt. Ik ben met 7 Nederlandse acteurs naar Suriname gereisd om daar een voorstelling te maken met een combinatie van Surinaamse en Nederlandse acteurs, allemaal jongens, voor de voorstelling Men Down Global. En er was 1 jonge man die zich bij ons begaf en een spiritueel Winti-priesteres, die zag de voorstelling en die zag achter hem een hele grote donkere vrouw staan. Apart voor ons, want het is een Nederlands komaf jongen, man, die in principe geen Afrikaanse roots heeft. Alleen die dame die zo geïntegreerd is met het Winti-geloof, die zag bij hem duidelijk een donkere, mooie, grote Afrikaanse vrouw staan. Zij is naar ons toegekomen en zij heeft gevraagd om met ons te praten. Overigens was zij niet de enige. Er is nog een andere dame geweest die exact hetzelfde zag. We hebben met hen gesproken en zij vertelde ons dat deze jonge man hoogstwaarschijnlijk zijn voorouderen ooit gevoed werd door een donkere vrouw. In de tijd van de slavernij gaven de dames de kinderen aan de slavinnen en die werden gevoed door hen. Nou, in de Winti-cultuur heb je de mama Aisa, een natuurwinti, een natuurgodin. Dat is ook de moeder van allerlei verschillende wintis. Hij heeft waarschijnlijk, of in ieder geval zijn voorouderen hebben, de mama Aisa heeft hoogstwaarschijnlijk hem gekozen, zijn voorouder, om met hem mee te reizen. Hij draagt dus een Afrikaanse mama Aisa met zich mee in zijn voorouder en dus in zijn lijn. Om even aan te geven, de reden waarom ik dit vertel is omdat het is een witte man, een witte jonge man, die in principe niet precies weet hoe zijn geschiedenis is gelopen, maar door de geschiedenis, door onze gezamenlijke geschiedenis, een stukje heeft meegekregen, ook op spiritueel niveau, van alles wat wij met ons meedragen en wat ons brengt. Het gaat niet over kleur, het gaat niet over migratie, het gaat over iets dat we een gezamenlijke identiteit hebben. En ik pleit ervoor dat we die gezamenlijke identiteit met elkaar gaan erkennen, zodat we snappen waarom alle muziek, dansstijlen, spiritualiteit zich op dit moment op deze manier met ons dragen. Dat was even een anekdote. Dankjewel.
Priscilla, you've said so many beautiful things tonight, really. Or did you want to do a last response? I was just about to finish it up.
Yeah.
You do, huh?
I think, we were talking about education. And, okay, a quick anecdote. Earlier this year, like in January, there was a report that came in Belgium after a UN Human Rights Commission delegation traveled in Belgium, and they were investigating the kind of relationship Belgium has with its immigrant populations. One of the things that came out of that was that 25% of kids graduating from high schools in Belgium don't even know that Congo was a Belgian colony. And so then I look at how we educate our children and how we teach them history, for instance. And I realized that actually we've learned so much from our colonial masters that even 59 years after the official independence, we're still reproducing exactly the same system, which is that the whole colonial project was to make Europeans out of us. Because it was negating our, Africans' humanity or the colonized, because it happened everywhere. It's about negating the colonized humanity and to try and make Europeans out of them. And so we integrated it so much that I can claim that I'm just as much European as any other European. Because I think in French, for God's sake. And yet this is not the first language I spoke with my mother, and it's not the language I speak with my mother, in fact. But after some time, we become that. So when we talk of the Black Atlantic, is there space for this kind of reality where it's like we've embraced so much our becoming European that, we're shocked when we come here and we're told that you don't belong here. It's like, what do you mean? That has been your project all along. And so I remember something I heard in an interview. This black, British intellectual of Jamaican descent, and Stuart Hall, of course. And it's like it was an interview in 2005, and he was saying that, yeah, when he got to England in 1951, someone asked him once, like, why are you here? And he replied, I'm here to complete the colonial journey. You started out in the 15th century. In the 20th century, I'm finishing the last leg. You shaped my life. I've come to look you in the eye. So maybe that's also Black Atlantic. You know?
Thank you. Thank you.
Just to add to that, I think you're completely right.
We are sort of closing off. People are making panicky signs to me. Yeah.
So this is my no. Just to close, absolutely true. And I think what's extremely important is that the opposite is also true. European identity. Even if I look at Holland, the national foods in Holland represent the culture. The speculaas and ontbijtkoeken are all completely products of that colonial history, of that same process. So in fact, the opposite is also true. European identity, even European cultural identity, the whole concepts of modernism, all these things come to a large extent from these countries, not just the products, but also the concepts and the ideas. And the origin of these ideas is negated. But in fact, that too is a result of the colonial project.
Yep.
Suti.
Yeah, I wanted to add actually to what you were saying, Priscilla, earlier, and to how you kind of added to that conversation. An idea which was proposed by Gayatri Spivak, also a theorist thinker about what is this post-colonial state. And she says the post-colonial society is a child of rape. What does it mean to be or to have a child born out of rape? Which is at this, you cannot say, I don't love this child. It's at the same time, you cannot deny the violence. So it is both violence as well as some kind of an enablement at the same time. So she speaks of some kind of enabling violation. And not to say that you resolve both and in the end you say, oh, well, something good has come out of this and, oh, you know, in the end we are proud or so. So I feel to think about it in terms of this retains for me what I find really, really powerful in the work of Paul Gilroy and in the way you presented it today as well, that we have this tension between something that offers pride and generates extremely new, innovative and things we have difficulty giving a term for, and at the same time, which retains a whole lot of violence. And to me, really, I'm sorry to be standing here as the woman who's speaking about the woman's body, but I think the fact that all this is playing out with and through the motive or the reality, the woman's body, just as the Black Atlantic is not a concept but a reality, these bodies that we see are not just concepts and ideas, but also real human beings. Yeah. So that violence, along with the enablement that it gives, is, to me, something that Gilroy's work has offered.
And you cannot negate that or camouflage that. There's so much work to do. To me, it was very impressive to see how you bring the reality of the Black Atlantic into this world in very different ways, including questioning the steps to get there. So I just want to thank Right About Now Inc. for inviting us, and Shruti, Priscilla, Francio, Faustin, our new friends at the table, and all of you for this evening. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Chris, for hosting and moderating the evening.